The Culture Pop Podcast is brought to you by the law offices of Jacob Emrani.
Accident or injury, call Jacob Emrani. Call Jacob.
Hey, it's Mase. If you or a friend or loved one is injured in an accident, the first person you should call is my friend Jacob. When I did this, Jacob was great. He helped me by talking through the next steps, which really put my mind at ease. When you're injured in an accident, you got to have an expert. That's why you call Jacob, just like I did. Call Jacob, 844-24-JACOB. That's 844-24-JACOB, or visit calljacob.com.
Call Jacob.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Culture Pop Podcast. I'm Steve Mason along with Sue Ballou, Sue Kalinsky. Sue, what's going on?
What's going on? I'm actually entertaining my nephew and his girlfriend. They are here from Hawaii.
Wow. They live in Hawaii?
They live in Hawaii. He's in the military.
Okay.
He's a linguist. He learned Chinese. And he's a translator.
That is like a money. I always say, if you're going to send your kid to college, one of the things you should learn Mandarin, learn Chinese, because, man, there is money in that.
Yeah. So they're actually a very interesting couple. He's a cyclist, and she is too. And there's this indoor cycling competition that's an Olympic sport.
Oh, I've seen it. It's crazy. It's where the bikes almost go sideways around this little loop.
She's trying to get into the Olympics. She's doing a trial.
Wow.
That's why they're here. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
So if her trials are, up to speed, so to speak, she'll move up to the next level and see what happens.
I want to say, because I've done a bunch of Olympics, I want to say that's called a velodrome.
Yes, it is.
Is it?
It is. Yeah. It's like 20 minutes from where we live in Long Beach.
Who knew there was a velodrome near Long Beach? All right, we got a great guest coming up, Saul Rubinek. I cannot wait to talk to him. He's in the movie Blackberry and has done so much in his career. So that's coming up for you. In the meantime, how about this, Sue? Meghan Markle was faking it.
What?
So she's doing a podcast for Spotify. I left that out there just because.
Okay.
So she's doing a podcast for Spotify, and it has been ended. So as it turns out, she was faking interviews. So what she was doing is interviews were handled by her staff. Then they dubbed in the questions in post-production. Now, could you imagine doing that? Like, for example, for us, we have somebody on our staff. We have an enormous research staff and all the people that we work with.
Actually, Tucker's sitting right beside me.
Sophie and Ron are in the next room. So, but can you imagine a staffer doing an interview with a famous person, then afterwards having the questions dubbed in by you and I?
That is so bizarre. I mean, that does not help her cause. Like, if people didn't hate her already.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Isn't that terrible?
So when did that come out?
Came out this week. The deal ended. They canceled the deal last week. And then this week it comes out that she was totally faking these interviews and other people were doing the interviews and she was just adding questions afterwards. It's awful. I mean, Bill Simmons said recently, who's a friend of mine, does a big time podcast. Bill said they're grifters. I really do think they're grifters at the end of the day. They tried to get this Spotify deal was for a lot of money. And then she's totally faking the interviews. That is grifter mode right there.
Right. Well, it makes you question everything about them now.
Yes.
Her mental health.
As if I wasn't already questioning everything.
Right. But the mental health and all these accusations that she was just making stuff up and playing victim and all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, now you can't believe anything that this woman does, or even really both of them.
You really can't. All right. One more thing. So how many articles of clothing do you think you bought last year?
I would say maybe 20.
Okay. What do you think the average American, how many articles of clothing they buy in a year? By the way, I think for me, it's like 5. I think I bought like a couple of Lakers hoodies and that was it. So what do you think the average American, how many articles of clothing do they buy in a year? You bought 20. I bought 5.
It's it's such a tricky question because what's the average American?
Sure.
There's such a range of people that can't afford to buy clothes, and then people who buy clothes every day.
But in other words, so people who bought 1,000 pieces of clothes averages out my 5. So what do you think the average person?
Okay, yeah, I get it. I would say 100.
Really? It's 70. I think that's I don't think I know a person who bought 70 articles of clothing in a year.
I guess because I know so many people who are clothes whores.
Oh, do you?
And they have something delivered to their house, probably multiple things delivered to their house every day.
Amazon?
Amazon. Yes.
Yeah. My designer, Emma Stone.
Yeah, that's right.
They do my entire wardrobe for
I
me.
know, it's like Target. Amazon.
Yeah. So, so you've got friends who are clothes horses. It's a better word.
Clothes horses. Okay.
Is clothes horses a thing?
Well, clothes horse, yeah, but yeah, I say horse.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I know a lot of people who order so much stuff from Amazon that like I'll go to their house and I'll see packages and I was like, what did you get? And they said, I have no idea.
I got to say, we are a household like that. I see boxes come in all the time. I order some of it, but I don't order like the normal like household staples. There's boxes coming in. I have no idea. Juan is busy. He's getting stuff for the house and we're getting ready for our big party on July. So there's a lot of boxes coming in and going. But yeah, 70 articles of clothing. I think Juan bought 1. I bought 5. We're dragging down the average a lot.
I would think Juan would be more of a shopper for some reason. He
has been saying for years, I need to buy new clothes. I need to buy new clothes.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah. So, our 70 articles of clothing. That is stunning to me. All right. Right now, here we go. Film, television, theater. Our guest today has done it all. He has starred in movies like Against All Odds, The Bonfire of the Vanities, Unforgiven, and True Romance. For television, he starred on HBO's landmark series, And the Band Played On. He has also appeared on shows like Curb Your Enthusiasm, Warehouse 13, The Last Tycoon, and Schitt's Creek. His current film is BlackBerry, about the rise and fall of the gadget we all used before the iPhone. Saul Rubinek joins us. Saul, thanks so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
You've got such an amazing career. I'm not even sure where to start. So let's start with your latest movie, BlackBerry. So I loved my BlackBerry back in the day. The iPhone is great, but the BlackBerry had the very best keyboard. Did you ever use a BlackBerry yourself?
No, in those days, it was like a business phone. And people were using it more for that. I was just communicating with my family, and I don't remember what I had. Probably a Palm Pilot and a cell phone, right?
Yeah, sounds right.
And I think we were just starting emails in those days, but I was really happy with them. I mean, I just worked on the movie for a week or so. I worked with Jay Baruchel before I didn't know Matt Johnson, and he had a really interesting technique of working. Plus, he's a massive, wonderful actor too. He's very good in this movie, and I just had a great time with them. And then when I saw the movie, I was really impressed with it. It was I knew it was going to be good, but it went way beyond my expectations. It's a terrific film. And the other more recent film I did, which is now starting to make a circuit of festivals, and it won the Rome Film Festival Audience Award, is a film that is a black and white single shot film, which I really want to talk about, called SHTTL, which is the Yiddish word for village. And it was shot 6 months before the Russian invasion. The production, a Ukrainian film, they all in the language of Yiddish, which is my first language, along with French, before I spoke English. So I got to perform in Yiddish, something my father started doing when he was a young man in Poland, and Hitler stopped all that. When I was a kid, I thought Hitler must have seen my dad in a plane, didn't want him to perform anymore. So yeah, that's been making the film festivals. It was just at the Jewish Film Festival, Washington Film Festival, many festivals. It's going to be There's going to be a co-sponsored event of this with Jamie Raskin sponsoring this screening in Washington at the end of July. So
wow,
we're pretty proud. It's a very modest movie, but in the sense of budget, but it's quite an extraordinary film. Very proud of it.
You know, you talk about speaking Yiddish. I'm Jewish. My parents spoke Yiddish. You know, they spoke Yiddish. Their parents actually, a lot of the parents of that generation, my parents' generation, didn't speak English. So it was like, you speak English to us and we'll speak Yiddish to you. So my parents never taught, we have 5 kids. She never taught any of us how to speak Yiddish because they like to talk about us in front of us.
Right. And
they would speak Yiddish. So whenever they were speaking Yiddish, it was like, oh man, this is probably really juicy. What are they talking about?
Well, with my parents, it was Polish, because Yiddish I was fluent in. And I grew up in an immigrant neighborhood, a working class French Canadian neighborhood in Montreal. So it was really street French, which is called joual, which is an argot, a dialect of working class French Canadians back in those days, and Yiddish. There were a lot of immigrants on those streets. And so I spoke a very strange melange of street French and Yiddish. And if my parents didn't want me to understand something, then I speak in Polish.
Yeah.
But I never got to perform in Yiddish. And see if I've got a photograph while we're talking of what I looked like in this movie. It's pretty extraordinary. I wish my parents were alive to see.
So it's a single shot black and white film.
Well, a single shot in the sense like 1917 is, right?
Right. Yeah, right.
Or.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I played the rabbi of this village. Single shot in the sense like Birdman is, or 1917, which is a series of master shots that are then digitally stitched together, one end and the other end. So it feels like one. It's a day in the life of this SHTTL, which is a very unusual film, and really will give a picture of what that. I mean, there were thousands of them all over Eastern Europe, all destroyed during the Second World War, but they had existed for 400 years. But they were. Our impression of that village life is really comes from Fiddler on the Roof, probably, and really is not accurate. The village life as portrayed in this movie is filled with atheists, very religious people, communists, Zionists, feminists. It's a very volatile, vibrant, strife, very, very a living organism, which is very, very rarely been painted except in photographs. So it's quite extraordinary, and hasn't got a release yet. I think it's making its way through festivals and trying to figure out what theaters it'll survive in before it's sold to digital streaming or whatever it is. So,
right.
Yeah. So that was really an unusual experience for me, doing a movie in Yiddish. I mean, there were two, sorry to go on about this movie, but
no, please.
Brain. And it was, there were two, my Yiddish was like at 35%, that's being generous because I hadn't spoken it in a long time. Like, could get by. And Yiddish is, I don't know if your viewers know this or your audience knows this, but Yiddish is German. It's essentially the German language. It is a dialect of German, 1,000 years old. And so if you speak Yiddish, you can understand German pretty much. Now, it's assimilated words from every culture where Jews went in the diaspora, Polish words, English words, French words. But it is essentially German. So having an opportunity to do this was amazing. There were only 2 other people. One, Moshe Labelle, who plays the lead in the movie, was himself, had left the Hasidic community in Brooklyn to become an artist and actor. And so his Yiddish was 100%. And there was Eli Rosen, who was our also in the movie, but our consultant, also was a refugee from the Hasidic world there at 100%. But everybody else learned it phonetically. So it was pretty interesting and amazing movie. Anyway, I won't go on and on about it. I'm just about that film. And if your audience gets a chance to see it, SHTTL, SHTTL, then they should go, especially see it in an audience. It has a powerful impact if it's seen with a lot of people, like a lot of movies do.
So this has to hit really close to home, right? Because, I flipped through your book. I would love to say I read your entire book, but I didn't necessarily have time. But I went through So Many Miracles. It's an amazing story about your parents during World War II. Describe now, does that ring differently now that you've done this particular film?
Well, the difference is that I spent the last 4 years writing a play about this. It's not my first time as a playwright. I had a play on Terrible Advice about 10, 11 years ago, both in London and it was translated in German into German. It was played in Berlin. But I'd written this book, and I'd also made a documentary film of the same title, So Many Miracles, which is the story of 1986 and the last years of communism in Poland. Together with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, I produced a documentary which was essentially a reunion between my parents and the farmers that had hidden them for 2.5 years.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's played all over the world. But I decided that I hadn't told the whole story. And I started working on a play about 4 years ago, and I completed the play. And I've now written an adaptation of it as a screenplay. It's called All in the Telling. And I've done readings of the play. We're now searching for a director for the play. I have a producer. We're raising money for it. And I've also written a screenplay that I want to direct of this piece. And what essentially that is a kind of, it's an adaptation of my book and the documentary film. It's how the writing of the book and the making of this documentary film affected 3 generations of my family, my parents' generation, my generation, and my daughter's. My daughter's now 32, her and my son is 28, their generation. So in a way, it's about intergenerational trauma, should relate to a lot of cultures and a lot of different people, whether you're Jewish, Black, Indigenous, and it doesn't matter. It really is about family. It's also a comedy, which you'll find surprising. It's a lot of it is very, very funny. And I don't pull any punches and I don't change any names. So it's about me and my family, and all the names are accurate. And it's been a labor of love. So I am very present. I mean, I thought I was done with the damn thing after I'd written a book and done a documentary and leave me alone. But I had a good friend, a playwright, who said, "You're not done with this subject. You haven't told your story. You haven't told your daughter's story," which is quite interesting. You haven't talked really about your relationship with your parents, which was difficult and troubled because they weren't accepting the fact that I was with a non-Jewish woman, which will relate to a lot of cultures, and the struggles that I went through there. And that's very funny, of course, in retrospect. And it's about how I came to write the book and do the documentary, which is really a series of accidents based on lies of me trying to cope with the terrible situation I was in. So that is very recent to me. And in the midst of all that, I ended up in Ukraine. Not my first time, by the way. I'd shot another movie in Ukraine about 7 years ago. But so I knew Ukraine a little bit, and I certainly knew the production team. And I'm now, horrified, of course, because most of our crew is on the front lines, and
wow,
and it's a terrible situation. But yeah, it was close to home. Doing a film about a shtetl in Yiddish. Kind of an amazing experience that I didn't expect to have happened to me in my career.
So how old were you when you were aware of your parents' experience in World War II? When did they start talking to you about it?
It's a really good question. And part of what my play is about. I don't remember a time where I didn't know about it. And I think if you're an Indigenous person or if you're Black in America, there isn't a time where you don't know about it. You know about it from birth. You don't remember a time where you don't know that you got to be careful if the police are around, if you're Black and if you're driving a car or wherever you are, or if you're Indigenous and you're dealing with racism, or if you're other. In any case, if you're a part of the LGBTQ community, if your otherness identifies you from a very young age. My wife and I had a long discussion before just as my daughter was born, about when we would introduce her. I believe that Jewish children, or at least my wife and I believed, that Jewish children are told way too young about genocide and the Holocaust. I don't believe that children are able to cope with that. And why should they know about genocide at a young age? Why? What would be the purpose of it? They're taught way too young about the horrors of the world, and there's no reason for it. And our children were educated in the Waldorf Rudolf Steiner school system, and we talked to the school about it. That's, again, part of my play. And they said, we think at the age of 13, when children are beginning to understand how certain events in history have consequences, they can begin to relate events in their own lives that have consequences in their own history. And they're going to be able to add up 2 and 2 and be able to see a larger picture. And that's when we didn't introduce my daughter to the book and the documentary until she was 13 years old. And then they asked us, the school asked us if we wouldn't mind playing the documentary film for the classroom. And that was its own difficulty and its own adventure, because I, at the time, had a real problem with anything called Holocaust education. And you're going to find that a peculiar sentence. And this has changed over the years, but in those days, I felt it was exclusionary of other people's tragedies, holocausts, and genocide. And over the years, Holocaust education has completely transformed into holding hands and become, together with anti-race hatred and anti-race racism, and joins hands with other cultures and other tragedies. But at the time, I was very nervous about it, and I had had experiences that weren't pleasant. I'm talking about within the Jewish community, going around trying to, promote my book, which was published by Penguin, and, having second generation, which is what I'm called, which is children of survivors, going to groups to talk about the book, and their reaction to me was awful, very awful. Why? Why would it be awful? Because they wanted me to talk about how awful the Poles were, and they didn't want me to be a historian. They didn't want a story about how Polish people saved my parents' lives, and they wanted their own agenda, and that soured me to the whole process. So the only way I was willing to play a documentary film for a classroom of children was if the school would agree to a personal history week, so that it would inspire the children to investigate their own backgrounds and then share that with the classroom. It became very difficult when we found out that one of my daughter's best friends was the great-granddaughter of an SS.
Oh, wow.
So you can imagine how the play starts to have its own drama.
Yeah.
Said about that.
Wow.
It's really interesting. I traveled years ago. I went to Spain, and we met an older Jewish couple. And, growing up Jewish and dealing with anti-Semitism, so much of my life, you have a feeling that all Germans are horrible people, And it was interesting how when the conversation was brought up about what happened during that time in history, they were saying how they didn't know their parents, they didn't know anything about it. Their parents didn't know anything about it. And I found it kind of hard to believe that they didn't, but they said that we took in Jewish families. In the beginning, we didn't know what was going on. But it's difficult in some ways, knowing what happened. There were a lot of German people that actually were not horrible people,
We're just people. I mean, part of what my play is about and my attitude towards this is that at one point I asked the classroom, after showing them documentary film, which is quite dramatic, right? These people who are saved and hidden for 2.5 years, whether they think this, I asked these 13 and 14-year-olds, whether they think that my family story is more dramatic than their family story. And of course, 30 hands went up in the air. And I said, well, no, the truth is that within 2 generations of your family, you will find stories of great courage, lives saved miraculously at the last second, stories of murder, great love affairs, and stories of adventure, tragedy, and comedy that are as profound and as rich as any of the great novels ever written within your own family, if you know who to ask, and if you have willingness to ask the questions. And I know that that's true of all of our families of the human race, is that there is a common humanity in the sense that in our own backgrounds, whatever culture you are, German, Israeli, Jewish, whoever you are, there are perpetrators, there are victims, there are bystanders, there are heroes and there are cowards, sometimes all in the same person. And you investigate these things in order to find out that you do have a common humanity with other people and other people's stories. What's going on in the world in authoritarian regimes is the revisionism of history. Even in America, the disallowance, the beginning to censor our own American history about slavery and treatment and genocide of the indigenous peoples, and other stories that are being kept from being taught by authoritarian regimes, or an attitude of revising history with a racist agenda, in my opinion. And this is not uncommon. This has happened throughout time, which is why my play is called All in the Telling, because it is all in the telling. It is in the telling from one generation to another. It's sharing our history, which begins to make us hold hands with other people's histories. Yeah. That's the thing in the world, I think.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. I want to ask about a few of your films, if that's okay. So I read a nugget that Jack Nicholson helped you get the role in Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven.
I was shooting a movie called Man Trouble with Jack while my wife was pregnant with my daughter Hannah in Los Angeles, and I remember going into the makeup trailer, and I'm not good at imitations, but I'll try. And he had like these frozen cucumber slices on his eyes to get them. I hear you're going to be auditioning for my pal Clint Eastwood. I'll give you a little bit of advice. And I said, Jack, when's the last time you auditioned for anything? I mean, I think advice about being a movie star, but I don't know about giving me advice to audition. I mean, you probably auditioned 35 years ago. And he says, so you think I'm an asshole? And I was just kidding him. And he said, look, and he did. Now, this was 1991, and people were not doing self-tapes. And he said, look, I know Clint, and you're not going to meet him. I said, in an audition. I said, I'm not. He said, no, you'll find out why. I mean, he really doesn't like to meet actors. And eventually I found out why, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But so you're going to end up in a casting office with a camera and a fluorescent light. Don't do it. Buy a camera, and don't just shoot the scenes that they're asking you to do. Go do more than is required in every area, in every way. So I bought a camera. I didn't have a good digital camera. And this is 32 years ago. It was before self-tapes. And I, shot with some costume stuff, and I shot scenes, with this character. I was cast within 5 days. I was cast very fast, and sent the tape in. Of course, casting directors would love that. I mean, they don't want you. If you can avoid, they can avoid you coming into their office, taking their time out. But I was already at the level at that 32 years ago where I could get that audition and get it seen. That's half the battle for actors, because there's thousands of people who want to audition for every role. But I was luckily at the level where I could have an audition, right?
Yeah.
When I met Clint, he said, well, I don't meet actors. I said, why? You're an actor. Why wouldn't you want to meet actors? He said, because I don't know how to say no to actors. I have such sympathy for actors. I really would. I need a distance. Otherwise, I'm too soft-hearted for it. And it's true. It's the way he was. I don't know if he still is that way, but I suspect he really was an interesting, fascinating director, more so than any other director I've ever worked with.
I saw the movie just recently, and I looked at it much differently, knowing that we were going to interview you. And when your character is introduced, you have like hardly any lines at all, but we see you on camera quite a bit before you actually speak. I think you say thank you, maybe the first thing that you say, and maybe 4 minutes goes by. But within that, we see you and we see you react. And there were a couple of times where you were, it looked like you were going to say something, but you didn't say something. And I'm curious if that was written in the script for you to do that. Was that Clint's decision, or was that an actor's decision?
It's a really interesting decision. I'll tell you a lot about Clint Eastwood. So when we started working, I didn't know anything about him as a director. And I read this, it was a great script. And I went to Clint, so I said, Clint, can I talk to you about something about the role. He said, sure. And I said, well, I don't have any lines, and I don't want any at the beginning of the movie, but the attitude that's written in the stage directions for this character, W.W. Beauchamp was the name of the character, is written as quite a nervous fellow, just in the stage directions. And I don't think that's right. He said, you don't? I said, no, I think he's never been to the West. He's just written about it. And I think he's traveling with English Bob, a famous gunslinger. And I think he should have an attitude that's quite, cocky and full of himself until he's faced with all these guns, and then he's going to pee his pants, right?
Yeah.
So I think that my attitude should change. And so Clint Eastwood said the following sentence. And you're asking me this because you're the director, and I figure you have an opinion that, I'm asking to change what's written in the stage directions. You're the director. I'm talking to you about it. He said, I see. Well, you'll get to know me. Saul, you're in charge of the department called W.W. Beauchamp. If I could play this role, I'd play it. I don't know the answer to your question. I could make up an answer and say you're right or you're wrong. I don't know. You could have said to me, I want to be even more frightened to begin, whatever. I'll be sure when you're on set to let you know if you do something that I don't understand. Now, I can tell you that I never in the entire shoot saw him direct an actor. He chose the script. He chose the crew. He's the soul of this man is a jazz musician. He's a jazz pianist. And you don't tell, when you're playing jazz, you don't turn to the saxophonist and give him notes on his solo. You jam.
Yeah.
And that's his attitude towards directing. I don't know if it still is, but it was then.
I hear also, by the way, it's a very quiet set that he never says action. Is that true?
I never heard. He just felt that, suddenly the actors were have to be. He's very conscious of the vulnerability of performers. So he would say things. All right, well, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead now. Okay, let's stop now for a minute. And no, I never heard action or cut because action, put you on a kind of a. He didn't like that feeling. Again, it really has to do with his sensitivity to actors' vulnerabilities and on set, and he wanted the best out of people, and he wanted people to feel they could make mistakes when working, just as you would want if you were getting a group of jazz combo together and you're jamming for the first time. So he had that feeling to him of a collaborative set. What that means is that if you're working I've worked with some great visionaries like Brian De Palma, for example. But Brian De Palma is like the opposite end of genius. Brian De Palma, who's an aficionado and a student of Hitchcock's and plans everything very carefully. If I was to put a T-shirt on Brian De Palma and a T-shirt on Clint Eastwood, on Brian De Palma's T-shirt on the front, it would say, "My vision," and on the back, it would say, "Shall be realized." If I was to put a T-shirt on Clint, it would say, "My vision," on the front, and on the back, it would say, "Hopefully will be transcended." And in order to transcend a vision, you have to risk it, which is why not all of Clint's movies work, I guess.
Yeah.
And you have to risk it. And some directors or director-auteurs aren't born that way. He is, as I say, more of a jazz musician. So the joke on our set during Unforgiven was we used to have a shorthand term, and the shorthand term was 5 people in France. What does that mean? It meant that we thought that's who would see this movie.
Really?
Wow.
There's Clint Eastwood is shooting an unarmed 17-year-old in this movie. We thought it was an art film Western. We loved it. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Loved the movie and the script. And he didn't change a word of it. I mean, it was all white pages when we finished. There was nothing changed in that script. He had bought it from Francis Ford Coppola in 1982 or something like that. Francis Ford Coppola owned it and had bought it to make his first Western from David Peoples, great screenwriter who I got to spend some time with. A couple of years later, I found out the story about that adventure. I mean, he never expected anything like that to happen to him again in his life. It was something that he wrote on spec in 1977 or something. He gets to see a private screening of it. He didn't know it was going to be a private screening. He's invited to a screening, and him and Clint, and he sees this movie, and it's exactly what he wrote. I mean, when is a screenwriter going to see that?
Right.
So that was a very unusual experience for everybody involved. But no, we thought we were in a great movie that was going to be seen by 5 people in France.
Right. That's amazing. And it's an unbelievable, it won Best Picture, it won Best Director, it won all kinds of awards. And the idea that you didn't know that there was an because it was a great revisionist Western, right? In a way, it's like sort of a capstone to Eastwood's career as a cowboy, right?
It wasn't written for Eastwood. And it was only when Eastwood read it as a writing sample. I believe what happened was David Peoples' agent sent it to Malpaso, the name of Clint's production company, as a writing sample of this David Peoples, who had already written Blade Runner, was a well-known.
Sure.
And so this is an example of David Peoples writing Westerns. And he said, "What do you mean example? What about this? This is great." And found out that no, he couldn't sell it because it was owned outright by Francis Ford Coppola. So he called Francis and bought it because Zoetrope was going under, and they were selling, I think all the furniture, even whatever they were doing. He sold it, and then Clint waited 9 or 10 years, because he thought he was too young at the age of 51 or 52 to play William Money. He wanted to be in his 60s. He wanted to be older before he played that role. Yeah.
Wow.
So I want to ask you about another picture. And I love this movie. I actually think this is a very underrated movie. It's directed by Rod Laurie. It's called The Candidate. And I would argue is like one of the great classic movies about politics.
The Contender.
Oh, I'm sorry. The Contender. Yeah, The Candidate was the Eastwood or the Redford movie. Yeah, The Contender. So I remember Jeff Bridges as president saying that the oatmeal cookies have got raisins so big they're like grapes. That sticks with me for some reason. You play the press secretary. Bridges just seems like the coolest, most mellow guy in the world, right?
Well, my real adventures with him were not on that movie. I did a movie years earlier called Against All Odds.
Sure. Taylor Hackford.
Where I played his sports agent. That's where I really got to know Jeff and his attitudes, the zen of movie acting. He was my first mentor, not intentionally maybe, but I had come from the world of Canadian television and movie making, and mostly television, CBC. And I was suddenly thrown into a Hollywood world. If you want to talk about Jeff Bridges, then it would be really Against All Odds that I could tell you about. I remember, there's a great Jeff Bridges story. I was doing a scene at a big nightclub, and I remember, God, I wish I could remember the name of the band, something in the Coconuts. A large group. We shot Jeff's side of the table. It was against a brick wall. And then there was this big room with this band on stage and 150, 200 extras. And that was behind me. And I felt all this responsibility, and to get it right, because they all had to mime and work their asses off behind me. And Jeff's on the other side of the table, and Taylor and I nailed it in the first take, because that's what I was used to having to do. Film was expensive in Canada, and you're shooting, and I nailed it. And Taylor said, "That was great. Let's do another one." And then did another one, and then something went wrong, and then I did another one, and he said, "It was great." I said, "Well, do you need any?" No, let's just do another one. And then we were into take 7 or so, or 8, and I'm starting to sweat, and I'm starting to feel I don't maybe want something, and And Jeff noticed that I was nervous, and he said, "It's your first time doing a big Hollywood movie?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, let me explain something to you. You're nervous." I said, "Look at all these extras behind me, and I just want to get it right." And he said, "Yeah. So where is all this focus right now?" He says, "On me." He said, "Right. You've got this many millions of dollars toy that is right now just focused on you. And you're getting upset because you think you nailed it, which you did in the first take. And now he just keeps wanting to do takes." But you see, Taylor Hackford just shot and just directed one of the biggest hits in the last 10 years called An Officer and a Gentleman.
Yeah.
It came off that movie. And right now, Taylor is king of the world in Hollywood. He can do whatever he wants. And he just is having fun. But you've stopped having fun, haven't you? Yeah. He said, "Saul, just enjoy yourself." So I started making shit up and improvising and fucking around. And then I don't know how many, 25, I don't know how many takes we did, but I didn't care anymore. So it was just Jeff's allowing me to understand what I was in. You know, he had grown up in it, right?
Yeah.
And made me understand.
Did they use your straight take, or did they use the one where you're fucking
combination of things?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what was it like on a Oliver Stone set during Wall Street? And one specific thing I wanted to ask you, in Michael Douglas's the iconic "Greed is Good" speech, what was the vibe in the room when he was doing that?
You know, we were just doing a movie. I mean, I knew my Oliver. Well, the vibe was just that Michael was great on the scene. I was just essentially an extra in the audience in the scene, and it was a beautifully written speech, and I'd been in beautifully written speech. I mean, I don't think anybody is aware or would be aware that "Greed is Good" became a mantra, a mantra of business world in America in the 80s. I'm sure not. Because it came so honestly out of Oliver Stone's father's experiences. My experience with that movie is anecdotal, and I have a funnier story than that, which is how I got this role. And I had been working on a play directed by Risa Brayman, who was Brayman's Hopkins was casting that movie, and she was a casting director, quite a well-known one. And she was also a director. And I was doing a play in New York that she was directing for no money. And so she, wanted to pay me back for working for no money on this play. And she said, "Well, I'm doing this movie. It's a big movie Oliver Stone is doing, and let's get you into an audition." Now, I knew that she told me, "God, everybody wants to play this role." Not my role. I mean, the role of the Michael Douglas. I wasn't auditioning for that, but like Marlon Brando wanted to play it. Robert De Niro.
Wow. Yeah.
All these people wanted to play this role. It was a really great role of Gordon Gekko. And when I met Oliver Stone, she gave me a hint about what he was like, and he recognized me from a couple of things, and he said, "Oh, well, do you have anything against small roles?" And I said, "I can't read the script. You're not letting the script out. And there's like movie stars sitting in the hallway waiting to audition for you. So no, I have nothing against small roles, but I got to read them, man. I got to know what I'm doing. I don't just want the gig. I want to play something for a reason." And he laughed and he said, "Okay, show him this role, this role, this role, this role. Go out, read those scenes and tell me which role you're interested in." So I came back, and what was this, right? What year was this? 87, something like that? Sounds
right, yeah.
I was 38, but I looked closer to 30. And I said, "I want to play this role, the lawyer role." And he said, "Oh, no, I shouldn't have showed you that. I want a 60-year-old to play that role." He said, well, that's the role I want." I said, "Why?" I said, "Because I'm trying to finance my documentary film. I'm going back to Poland." So it was 1986. And this character works in about 9 different locations. You're going to have to hire me for at least 9 weeks. It's not the role. I said, "No, it's the money." And he said, "Oh, you're hired." That's a Republican attitude. I love that attitude.
Listen,
you know what? I just one thing,
ahead,
Steve,
Sue.
before we go, I wanted to ask you, what was the first film role that you got that you didn't have to audition for?
The very first film I ever did was a movie that I didn't audition for. It was a Canadian film called, I was well known in Canada at the time. It was a Canadian film called Agency, not a very good movie, but with Robert Mitchum. And I played a good role. And I think I was even nominated for that role. And it was, but not a great movie, kind of espionage movie. I didn't audition for that movie.
Wow, your first role.
Well, no, it wasn't my first role. I'd done 10 leading roles on CBC by that point.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay.
You're asking me about a feature film. So the first feature film I ever shot that I was ever in was Agency, and I didn't audition for that. I mean, It's been back and forth for me. Sometimes I'm offered a role, sometimes I audition, sometimes it's a meeting. It's a lot of different things.
Sure.
Listen, in addition to having just an unbelievable career, you're a great storyteller. And we appreciate you coming on. Blackberry is streaming on Apple. Your movie that is touring right now, or is on the festival circuit, is called
SHTTL. SHTTL.
And then your play, which
All in the Telling, which we're hoping will get on as soon as I can get the right director and raise the money, which we're doing.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. Saul, thank you so much for sharing some time with us.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Saul.
There you have it. There is Saul Rubinek joining us. And the story of his parents, just amazing. I mean, hidden by Polish farmers during World War II. Just an incredible story. And I don't know how and it sounds like he has used the book and the play and the documentary to sort of exorcise some demons and tell a story that is more uplifting, I guess,
Yes.
A way that, his parents survived and he was born in Germany, I think. He was born in Germany, I think.
In Germany, he was in like a, what was it called? A
displaced persons camp?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So he was born. It's an amazing story.
Yeah, I wanted to, we didn't get to ask him this, but I wanted to know when he did the documentary, it was basically reuniting his parents with the couple, the farmers who hid them.
Yes.
I wanted to know what that feeling must have been like for both of them.
Oh, I can't imagine. That's an incredible story.
Yeah.
Wow, great guy. I look forward to seeing the movie that's on the festival circuit. And Blackberry is a great movie. If you haven't seen it, it's at like 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's streaming on Amazon Prime. Go check that out. Saul, very good guy and very good storyteller. I love that. I want to remind people of a couple of things. First of all, we are now on YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com and search Culture Pop Podcast, you can find our channel and you can subscribe to it. If you're watching right now, by the way, on YouTube, you already found our channel. So I guess that's not
you're here.
But if you're listening, you can go watch the show. And of course, we're on Spotify and we're on Apple and on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple. We would love to hear from you, comment about the show, question about the show, question about the guest, anything like that. And we will respond to everything for you because we appreciate you. We especially appreciate, we've got a term in radio. I don't know if it's appropriate here, called P1s. Do you know what P1 is? Somebody who's just totally locked into your stuff. So you were at the Mandy Awards with us. Those were all P1s. Those are all people that live and die. So if you're somebody that waits for the podcast, listens to the pod, we want to do something for you. And I'm thinking, Sue, I'm going to have some, should I have t-shirts or hoodies made? Which one do you think? I'm a hoodie guy.
I'm a hoodie person. I mean, that would be amazing to get some swag for people.
Hoodies,
wow.
Yeah. So for our hardcore listeners, I'm going to look into that too. We appreciate you listening very much and watching very much. Thank you so much. And Sue, great seeing you. And we will see everybody next time on the Culture Pop Podcast.